You know, it's always fun to take a step back from the usual when it comes to gaming. We have so many different subgenres that act as their own inspired genres that'll bring in new generations of gameplay and concepts. It's revolutionary, but it also doesn't have to be this complicated. Fun fact for everyone that was born after 2009, there was a time where we had primary genres without all the extra fluff. Simple times we used to live in. It's always been interesting to grow up with games constantly evolving. It felt like yesterday where I was playing Super Mario Galaxy and Sonic Generations, and now I'm playing Hogwarts Legacy and Spider-Man. For me, it's an absolute honor to be able to witness and be a part of these massive changes. But what about the massive pieces of plastic we play these games on? Video games aren't the only things evolving as time goes by. We can't just play SimCity on a floppy disk and act like there's nothing wrong. Nearly every AAA console brings us something different that basically writes itself a new rule that every console needs to have. The NES gave us a lesson on how to press down on the 4 basic directions. The SNES taught us 15% of the alphabet. The N64 may have been weird, but we still use analog sticks to this day because of it. The PlayStation 1 introduced us to dual analog sticks and manual camera movement. The PS2 will always be the first ultimate console. Nearly everything Nintendo has done after the GameCube is part of the norm today. But I want to take some time to talk about one of the most out there ideas we've ever seen. I will give you a fair warning, there have been lots of broken TVs, walls, bones, relationships, but it's all just for laughs. I'm putting that in quotes because it's not all just for laughs. So let's take a quick look at the Nintendo Wii. As we all know, the Nintendo Wii was very successful, but looking back at its original announcement, it seemed like a very risky move. The entire concept of using motion controls as a primary controller option had boom or bust potential. I think at the time, if this fails, it would be really hard for Nintendo to bounce back from that. But the casuals spoke out and they had gotten themselves an icon. The Wii is the ultimate casual console, mainly because of how different it is from every other console, including handhelds. Nintendo basically told you to get your ass up and move your body. The Wii, to most adults and parents at the time, from my own experience, saw it as a great way to get in a good exercise, and when they forced their 7-year-old kids to play Wii Fit with them, it's basically the fun games that come with it instead of the actual yoga and exercise. Innovation and creativity was Nintendo's highest trait, and that transferred over to the creation of the Nintendo Wii. Using a controller that looked a lot like a TV remote with a sensor in it in order to read movements and control either a menu or your character. A very interesting idea to go all in on the player's motion. Surprisingly enough, us Americans got a Japanese product first. Released in North America on November 19, 2006, December 2nd, 2006 in Japan, 5 days later in Australia, and a day later in Europe. The Wii library of games is known for 4 big elements in my eyes, giving us some of the best games of that generation, such as the Mario Galaxy games, the Wii series of games excluding 2, Smash Bros. Brawl, and top tier first party games. The next element is being able to play GameCube games. So if you never got to play the GameCube growing up, you basically have 2 consoles in one for the price of $250 here in the States. In today's economy, that's a goddamn steal. Next up is that half the games use motion controls while the other half doesn't. And also most Wii versions of games from other consoles are pretty cringe. Who would play Mortal Kombat Armageddon like this? This makes me feel a certain way and I don't like it. But with all those major elements, there is one that shouldn't stand out as much on paper, but when the time came, it's very iconic for good and bad reasons. The Wii Shop channel is iconic and was one of the best things that gaming had to offer during this generation. But there are 2 elements of the Wii Shop channel that made people fall in love with this joyous application. First up is Virtual Console, the home of a great number of legacy content of the past, ranging from the NES, SNES, and N64, with a good number of very charming additions of some third-party consoles, the Sega Genesis, Master System, Mega Drive, and even some obscure pieces of hardware, Neo Geo, TurboGrafx, and the Commodore 64. It's always great to play legendary games of their time, and with the addition of GameCube backwards compatibility, it makes the Wii look like the best console for hardcore fans and casuals as well. It brings the best of both worlds. The second element is very well known, and that is the massive amount of shovelware on this system through WiiWare. It's so interesting that a ton of games on the Wii are just there for the sake of being those weird options, because you can't have a virtual shop without these weird standouts. I guess it's a nice way to spice up your life and try something different every now and then, but these games weren't exclusive to the digital realm of 2006. Bargain bins were filled to the brim with shovelware games, and it was only so rare that you would find a somewhat decent game in there. Don't know if that's a good thing or if Walmart just never cared. I'm going with the latter on this one. It's 2006. But there was a shovelware game out on the shelves with all the other Wii games that caught my attention. It had a familiar look, but it was also different. And to think, think, this wasn't the only one of its brethren at the time. When the Wii was released, not only did Barnyard become a national sensation, but there was this other game that was pretty cool, Wii Sports. It was revolutionary, showing off how the motion controls work and giving us a good idea as to how this new element of gaming could be normalized in the future of gaming hardware. It soon got its own sequel that expanded on the advanced motion controls. Apparently the Wii Remote by itself wasn't good enough, so in 2009 we got ourselves the Wii Motion Plus, a chicken McNugget that you plug into your Wii Remote for more precise controls as you throw your Wii Remote out the window after losing multiple boxing rounds to your grandpa. Alongside the release of this wired pizza roll, we got ourselves Wii Sports Resort a few weeks later. It's an amazing follow-up to the original game. It's clearly more than a tech demo, but it still shows off the amazing potential of motion controls when it's not stuck in some random person's head. So many gaming studios at the time saw the massive success of these two phenomena and thought they should give it a shot. Well, at least I can say they released something. There have been a lot of Wii Sports clones over the years. Big Beach Sports, Kid Fit Island Resort, Connect Adventures, Connect Sports, the iToy Play Trilogy, Game Party, and a lot of shovelware bowling games on the Wii. These were definitely video games released by studios and publishers. Game Party was one of those games I played, and for some weird reason I always thought there were about 9 of these games instead of just 3, but I want to slide into what I believe to be the best of these clones. That's not really a flex because the bar is already super low to begin with, but I believe there are 3 games and it brings up the bar about 3 inches higher. So alongside all the other Wii Sports clones, we come across one of, if not the first out of all of them, one of my favorite childhood games, and I didn't think I would still be enjoying it over a decade later. There might be something wrong with me. Alright, so let's start off where everything began and get into this extremely obscure and niche franchise. But before we get into the main attractions, I actually want to mention that there are 3 other games in this franchise that I'm not going to talk about, and one of them is one of the worst video games of all time. It's so bad I might have to censor it for the sake of the kids. I don't want them to be traumatized this early in their lives. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Deca Sports Wii Trilogy. Here we have the start of one of my favorite religions, and to think the developers and publishers were the same people who made some Mario Party games and a game called Nuts and Milk. I think I'll just leave that there before I give anyone any ideas. Deca Sports was originally revealed at Tokyo Game Show 2007 under the title Deca Sporta, exclusively in Japan. I have no words. The idea was to combine sports events from both Summer and Winter Olympic Games as well as the X Games by creating a compilation that would have a wide appeal. Every mode is unlocked within the game right from the beginning, as everything was designed to be as accessible as possible. Also, Adidas signed a partnership with Hudson, allowing its logo to appear in-game, so you'll see Adidas sponsorships everywhere, and our athletes we play as even wear Adidas shoes and other gear throughout the sports in every game that was released. It's a nice touch, and to think, this is how I was able to contribute to Adidas for the past decade and a half. It was originally planned to be released in December in Japan, although a Hudson rep claimed that the studio didn't anticipate high review scores, noting the simplicity and graphics quality as typical complaints of Wii games. Honestly, you gotta give them props for the high level self-awareness. So Deca Sports was released on the Nintendo Wii first in Japan on March 19th, 2018. 2018? That is wrong. March 19th, 2008, May 13th, 2008 in North America, June 6th, 2008 in Europe, August 19th, 2008 in Australia, and April 23rd, 2009 in Korea. The similarities to Wii Sports are there, but it's mainly because it's somewhat of a minigame collection. Everything else is relatively original to the game itself. Put the word original in all the quotations you can think of. The bar is not that high to start, and I'm not even surprised, but let's hope my nostalgia can carry me through this, and let's see what we have to work with. Let's start off with the athletes we play as. In these games, there are 8 teams to choose from. You may notice a difference in size with most of these teams. Well, there are 3 different size categories for those characters that play their own roles: small, medium, and large. Small character is weak but fast on their feet, medium is well balanced as they don't have any strengths or weaknesses, while large is powerful with slower movement. It'll make sense when we get to the sports themselves. Each team has 5 athletes, and I always like to imagine that the first athlete of each team is the captain or leader of that team, but honestly they have no characterization in the first place, so Imagination Lane is the best place to be when playing these games. Let's go over these random people and figure out the differences. Our first team holds the face of the entire franchise, as we have an all-male squad to work with. They mainly excel with power as they have 3 large athletes, but they're able to kinda balance it out with a small and medium athlete as well. This is Team Thunder. We're going to go over a unique element of this game later, so remember these sizes and why they're so important. My favorite member of this crew is Brandon because he looks high out of his mind, and also I really like that hairstyle. But Charlie is a very close second as he looks like a hippie. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Next up, we have an all-female team, and they're the exact opposite of Team Thunder as they have 3 small athletes and 1 medium and 1 large. And yes, I will have a chicken sandwich with that. They prioritize speed over power, so they'll have a better time moving on the ground. Ash is my favorite of the bunch, but I can understand why people would see her as a non-female. So let's move on. Next up, we got ourselves a feisty team, a team that's straight up all about that fast action. They can outspeed anyone bigger than them, but when it comes to more power-based sports, even the game tells you not to expect many wins if you choose this squad. Self-awareness is a good thing, people. Samuel and Debbie just look like they'll beat you up if you look at them the wrong way. This next team will kill you when it comes to anything related to power. They live and breathe strong. LeBron is the easy standout for obvious reasons as he's one of my favorite athletes in the entire franchise. This team is very dominant in the right circumstances, but once they have to move around, they're slower than a Waylord on land. It takes forever to get around with these athletes, but when it comes down to raw strength, this team will carry. Up next is the funniest and most accurate name in the entire game, the Average Joes. They are the most balanced team with all medium-sized athletes. No skills that they exceed at, but they can get the job done. Pepe, Riley, and Jackie are my favorites as Brian is the literal mascot of what an average Joe is, at least as of 2008. The Crusaders are next on the list, and they're pretty much Team Thunder and Mad Maidens combined. 1 small, 3 mediums, and a large. A really good balance of athletes for any situation. Ted, Rufus, and Stephanie are fun athletes to play as, but I don't pit this team that much. I find it funny how it took me over a decade to figure out the name of this team because they have 3 small athletes and 2 large athletes as they don't have any balance whatsoever. You gotta be smart with your choices, but not having a balanced athlete might come back to haunt them. Jay, Laura, and Sadie are my go-tos for the neon and blue. The final team is one of the best creations I've ever set my eyes on, and those are the Disco Knights. A great combo of every archetype that creates an even scale as they have the assets for every single situation. Also, they all have fresh afros, and Tony is the only white guy who could realistically pull off an afro. Lots of combinations and variety to choose from. Also, Cliff is the best character in the entire game. I will fight you. So these are the athletes we will be seeing throughout this entire review of all of these games, so get used to their faces. Yes, their designs aren't as complex as they should be because they all wear fixed outfits, but they aren't incredibly bland and stale either. There's a lot left to be desired, but that doesn't mean that it's completely awful. There's a certain charm to these characters. Maybe it's because I've been playing these games for a very long time, but something about it feels nice to me. Now we gotta throw our athletes into some sports action, so let's go over the 10 sports we play and hopefully not lose any tournaments. Now we're getting to the fun part. We got ourselves 10 semi-unique sports to choose from. Let's go over them one by one and try not to be super biased. I'm also going to give every single sport in all of these games an overall rating out of 5 because I want to be different. Our first sport is badminton, and this is where Deca Sports earns its reputation of the content being super f***ing basic and standard. We play in a 1v1 setting, and all you gotta do is swing your Wii remote at the right time in order to hit the shuttlecock. You can spike it into your opponent's face, a normal shot, or you can play very conservative and just tap the feather ball a short distance. Things can get very tough when you play against good competition. Now, I want to mention this really cool element of strategy. As I mentioned, every athlete is one of 3 sizes, and that's their general role they play for certain sports. In badminton, power athletes have a very strong smash. It's pretty hard to react to, but you can pick any athlete for this sport without any consequence unless you're bad. This is a decent start despite the extreme simplicity. Hudson Soft even got themselves to make a really mid Mario Kart knockoff. Just take everything that makes Mario Kart iconic and strip it away, make motion controls mandatory, and you got yourself some normal ass go-kart racing. All you gotta do is hold down 2 and just steer your kart. Speedy athletes have great acceleration but lose steam when it comes to top speed. Balance is as if you're picking Mario, and power athletes have terrible acceleration but they can stomp their foot on the gas and get going with a bit of momentum. The competition setting can be either a 1v1 or free-for-all with either 4 or 8 competitors, 1 athlete from each team at random. I usually pick smaller characters for that nice acceleration boost at the start, and it's really easy to get back into it if you crash into the walls. Be happy you don't get chucked out of your vehicle whenever you run into someone at full speed. Now we come to my least favorite sport in this game, but as time went by, it's still my least favorite, but I like it more. It's just normal curling. You slide a curling stone near the target and try to get as close as you can to the middle. Sometimes you have to strategize on how and where you want your stone to go and when to sweep to slow down the stone. In this 3v3 setting, each team gets 6 stones, every athlete throws 2, and whoever has the most stones closest to the middle of the target wins. The strategy is there because sometimes you need to bump your stone forward or bump your opponent's stone away from the target. And speaking of strategy, I think it's super important to have one of every archetype for this sport. Each have their own throwing power, so you really have to think about what your next move should be and how it can benefit your team in the long run. Although it is very slow and not all that exciting. Don't try playing hockey with these sliding boulders. You will not get the best outcome. Our second racing sport as we make our way to Denver and do what people rather do than ski, snowboarding and skydiving. We race around one of 3 tracks and that's pretty much it. We basically go from point A to point B, jump off of slopes, make some very tight turns and race to the end in this 4-player free-for-all. Power athletes get a big acceleration boost as they can get ahead of the rest real quick. You can also run into each other and ruin the race for others, which is always fun if you have a mint julep in your hand. There isn't much else to this sport, but I guess the tricks are pretty cool. We got ourselves another 1v1 setting as we play some normal archery. Aim your bow and arrow at the target and be cautious of the wind and let it rip. We start at 30 meters and make our way to 50 meters. We also have a set amount of arrows we can shoot every 2 rounds. Whoever has the highest score at the end wins. The only real thrill I get from this sport is whenever the game is very close. One mistake could cost you, but it mainly depends on the difficulty you choose. This is one of 2 sports where it doesn't matter what type of athlete you go for because you don't have a certain advantage against your opponent. It's not the most exciting thing, but it leaves a lot to be desired. I will say that this sport is exactly what kart racing is, except we're in a different general setting. I believe this to be more interesting compared to bumper carts, mainly because bikes are cooler than karts. The controls are super tight, especially around certain corners. You can choose from 3 different tracks, and just like kart racing, this sport can be played in a 1v1 or a free-for-all between 4 and 8 players. I do like the detail of having to land at a certain angle in order to continue your momentum whenever you're in the air. It's a nice aspect, and I know full well I've lost many tournaments in the past because I never knew about it. Also because I wasn't even 10 and stupid. Yet another similarity to kart racing is that the smaller characters have better acceleration but large athletes have a higher top speed. This sport is sticking to the trends and being not all that special. Now we're on the sandy beaches of the land of Deca Sports in Sapporo, Hokkaido, Japan. That's where Hudson Soft was first founded, so let's just go with that. This is if badminton was on the beach and in a 2v2 setting. This is normal beach volleyball, and depending on which athletes you choose depends on the power of your spikes. Either it takes 3 years to get to the ground or is already on the ground before you get the chance to jump for a block. I will say there is a lot of strategy for the sport because your athletes move automatically, so you have to be smart about when you want to jump and attempt to block a spike. If you're not able to get the block, then you're left extremely vulnerable, and if your teammate doesn't give you a good bump, then say goodbye to your point. It's very risky, but whenever you do get a block, it's so satisfying. Even though the gameplay is kind of bland, the strategy does bring an interesting dynamic. These final 3 sports are controlled with both the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, and we're starting off with the childhood favorite. When I was younger, I always thought figure skating was for sissies, but when I picked LeBron on a random day, I became infatuated with figure skating as a whole. This is the second sport that you can pick any athlete of any size and it won't matter. In my opinion, this is the most unique way of playing figure skating. You have to follow a trail of yellow circles, and there are a few different trick circles that you have to flick the Wii Remote up at the right time and keep doing this until your performance is over. It's a cool one for me, and there's a bit to this. We got 3 songs to pick from, we can actually do normal tricks whenever we want, and I find it kind of funny that you can actually finish your performance early. Once you do, the music just cuts off when you hit the final pose. The athlete with the most points wins, and this can be in a 1v1 setting or a free-for-all with 4 players. Next up, we got my favorite sport of the bunch, basketball. Classic 3v3 with some banger music. This is how basketball would be played in any other game on the Wii. It reminds me of basketball in Mario Sports Mix, but you can't throw a red shell at someone as they're going up for a dunk. Shoot threes, steal the ball, and break some goddamn ankles. Even though you can't actually break some ankles because they don't fall if you whatever. With a harder CPU, this could be a very intense game with constant stealing and trying not to get dunked on. Speaking of which, I believe you should go for a balanced team when playing this sport. When they have the ball, there's a noticeable speed difference, and the balance and power athletes can dunk while the small fry can only lay it up. Sad that I won't be able to dunk on Kevin with Casey, but it's whatever. The final sport, and this is part of a pattern that every game has, and that's the 5v5. The first of these sports is soccer. You get to switch around positions and then play from there. I believe you should probably have all your smaller players on the field because they get around faster, and you should have either a balance or power athlete at goalie. It could change the pace of the game in the long run. Other than that, it's nothing special, it's just soccer. When it comes to the overall gameplay of these sports, it's very basic for what it is, although it does work. It's not great or revolutionary, but I'd rather the gameplay be a bit standard than not playable at all. The motion controls are decent, but there are some inconsistency issues, and I gotta remind you that this is a 15-year-old Wii game. Even with Wii Motion Plus, the difference is there, but it's not substantial. The sports themselves are fine. They're nothing to cheer over, but I don't see myself jumping into shark-infested waters because of them. They're very mid, and the average rating is 3 out of 5, so at least it's consistently mid, just like my YouTube channel. Alright, so we got ourselves 6 different modes to choose from, and they have something to do with the sports in some way, shape, or form. At least there is some variety of replay value, and the constant losing in every league will get you coming back. But let's start off with open match. This is the best way to experience all the games however you want. You can customize the settings for each sport and play to your heart's content. You get access to all the racetracks and all the racing sports. You can play full sets of badminton and volleyball and all the fun things. It's vanilla, but it gets the job done. The tournament is a 3-round juggernaut. In 7 of the 10 sports, you pick one athlete from whatever team you choose and send them into the competition. It's the same thing for beach volleyball and basketball, as you pick your athletes and you have to stick with them for the entire tournament. One thing I love about this game and how it stands out from the others is that whenever you move on to the next round, the difficulty gets higher. You start off the first round really easy, but when you make it to the final round, the CPU is the most difficult, and it's a cool feature as it really does test your skills for every sport. For me, there are some really easy sports in the tournament, such as kart racing, supercross, basketball, figure skating, and snowboard cross, but everything else is extremely hard, but that's not a bad thing. I'm just incompetent at 15-year-old video games. I love the constant challenge from the CPUs, and I believe it's one of the best aspects of this entire game. The CPUs don't hold anything back, and you have to rely on your own skill in order to win. This is usually my go-to mode when playing these games, the Deca League. A 4-team gauntlet on who wins the most prized trophies in Deca Sports. We play every single sport in one go, win points based on placing, and whichever team has the most points by the end of the final sport wins the entire league. We got 3 different leagues to play through based on difficulty: the Rookie League, the Regular League, and the Champion League. I want to take some time and go a bit deeper into the Champion League. Not only is it the hardest league, but we get to compete against a mystery team known as the Superheroes, the ultimate competitors, as they're just the perfect team. I remember when I first saw them and I was confused out of my mind, and then I realized that they're unstoppable. The league, in my opinion, is the best way to test your skills and get those big wins. It's also a fun way to play all the games non-stop, back to back. It's always great to see your favorite team hoist the trophy at the end, and we hear a nice sentimental song as a nice way of wrapping up a big adventure of constant sports. To add a little more spice to the series, we got ourselves some challenges. Every sport has special designs set up for these challenges, and the criteria is different for nearly every one, so let's go over it. We have to hit the shuttle at targets on the other side of the net. It's like a really weird game of tic-tac-toe, but it really isn't tic-tac-toe. And those give us points, and we have to try to hit as many targets consecutively without missing. The more targets you hit in a row, the more points you rack up. You have to use motion controls in order to determine where you want to aim. It's pretty tough because motion controls are weird, especially in this economy, and I usually never come back to this one. Do you like time trials? Well, welcome to kart racing in Deca Sports. We get to choose which tracks to race on and go for the records on all of them separately. This isn't that interesting because it's just a solo race. This one is hard because you've got 6 stones to throw and you have to figure out whether or not to bump your stones forward for more points or to avoid all that together. The strategy is nice, but if you use your brain too much, you'll end up with 0 points, similar to how many bitches I get. Welcome back to the time trials. This is the exact same as the kart racing challenge. Just slide your way down the snowy slopes and get to the end as fast as possible and try to break the record. Nothing special going on here. This is one of my favorite challenges out of the bunch. You have to aim and hit the yellow on the target. As every round goes by, the yellow gets smaller and smaller. You continue until you miss. You have to be cautious of the wind, especially when you're shooting from 50 meters away. It's really cool and can help you with your aim. If you had to guess what this challenge would be, would you guess time trials? Well, you'd be correct. Congratulations, you win absolutely nothing. This is my least favorite challenge, mainly because the game thinks I'm swinging the Wii remote in one way when I'm trying to go the opposite way. It's pretty rough, but we have to spike the ball to a highlighted target in the sand. It's relatively buggy because of the motion control inconsistency, but I know whenever you get it going how you want, it's pretty satisfying. It's been years since I felt that with this challenge, and I'll probably never feel it again. This is another favorite because of how unique it is. You have to complete the routine in whatever shape takes form. You don't even have to do it in any specific order, just make sure all the yellow circles are cleared out. We got a time limit, so we have to clear as many routines as possible. I love how the shapes get more complicated the further you go, and it's a lot of fun to fool around in. This is another fun one, as you have to score as many baskets as you can within 90 seconds, and there's a very fun way of doing this. Pick a balanced or power athlete and just dunk to your heart's content. I just love watching them soar in the air every time, as the dunk is very powerful. I will say, the females dunk better in this game than any WNBA player. The final challenge is an interesting one. We have to pass the ball between 4 players and score as many goals as possible. If you get your goal blocked or caught, then it's game over. It's interesting to figure out different ways of scoring a goal, or you can just use the same strategy over and over again until it doesn't work. So the challenges are a nice way of switching things up, testing yourself, and even improving your skills so you can kill the superheroes. I swear to you, I'm not bitter. Believe it or not, I do think this game has some greens that stand out, and they clearly benefit the product. The greens give this game a bit more charm and make it work more than it should, but even though I do have more greens than reds, I do believe the reds are a bit more significant and more impactful to this product. They're the biggest reasons why these games get low review scores. So let's start off with my personal positives. Even though the character designs are basic, something about them just gives me good vibes. I don't think they have to be super complex in order to be registered as good. I love how the characters look, and the variety is nice between both genders. Hudson Soft did diversity in 2008 through 2011 better than most major companies do today. I also love the team colors, a primary and secondary color to create really nice combinations, alongside with every unique outfit everyone wears for every sport. It's standard, but it works, and I think that's a good thing. This is an interesting plot point. The power of imagination is a beautiful thing, but it's unfortunate that you slowly lose it as you get older, because getting older in this economy sucks. But one thing that I loved doing back when I was younger was creating my own personal lore and timelines for these characters and teams. It was always so cool for me to just give these characters their own stories and backgrounds. I could definitely make videos on that if I wanted to, but I'm creatively inept, so I'll just keep that to myself. It's true that these characters are obviously just here as choices for the players to choose from, but it's nice to be able to think outside the box and make these characters yours in a certain way. The Disco Knights are the best team in the entire existence of this franchise. They are my go-to, not only because of their ungodly riz and fresh afros, but because I believe they're the best team in the game, because they have all the different types of athletes for any sport. They're more balanced than the actual balanced team. You need some speed? You got Steph. Tony and Sabine got you if you need to overpower everyone. Alongside that, Lucy and Cliff are great wildcards. If the other two games didn't have a certain element, I would always use them in every game, but we'll get to that when we get to that. This is what makes this game so unique compared to the other elements. You have to actually think about what size athletes will give you the biggest advantage, or you just don't rely on your brain and just play with whoever you want. That works too, but I love the idea of having to use specific athletes for specific situations. I understand why they got rid of this mechanic in future games, but it makes this one stand out very nicely because of that extra difficulty. One thing I think is really cool is the unique team composition. Let's take the Boost Force as an example. 3 speedy and 2 power. It's interesting that they don't have at least one balanced athlete, but they can dominate in many areas. It's so cool to see how these different stats work and seeing them in action, especially when you have 2 or more athletes at once and you get to see every possible combination of the composition, and this obviously includes how you want to position certain athletes in certain sports, but it mainly leans towards a sport like soccer, because if you have a team like the Crusaders, Team Thunder, or any team with at least one of every athlete, you're set for success. But teams like the Hard Hitters and Speed Strikers will be a challenge because you only have one attribute to rely on, as their strengths are the opposite of their weaknesses. But it's possible to win with every team. I'm just using my brain too much. Alright, time for the not so good aspects of this game. These are some pretty big reds, as they are one of the many reasons why these games are given the cold shoulder, and it's 100% understandable. I'm not going to let nostalgia blind me into thinking that these games are as good or better than Wii Sports, because obviously they're not. I'm looking at both sides here, and obviously these are my personal opinions as well. So here we go on the red side of things. The gameplay, without a doubt, in my opinion, is the worst aspect of this entire game. It's simple, but at times it feels like it's way too simple to where it becomes kind of bland. Maybe it's because I'm constantly playing it, but there are times where I get bored of the same thing. It's hard to switch things up because there's nothing to switch up in the first place. There's nothing interesting, and we get these sports in their most vanilla form with nothing to add. No variety except being able to play for longer periods of time against tougher opponents. The spice is not there, and I like myself some spice, but it's nowhere to be found. Obviously, there's a lot to build off with this first entry, but I do believe there was a big missed opportunity regarding our athletes. I do wish there was a way to customize them in some way. Not like customizing their facial designs, but I do wish we could create our own gear for the sports. It would be pretty cool to see some customized outfits in action, but I'm fine with what we got. So, Deca Sports 1. When it comes to the series, it really does set a decent base for the other games to build and improve off of. The progressive difficulty, the sports, motion controls, and more. I really do adore this game, and as I got older, I appreciate it a lot more compared to when I was younger. I loved it at the time, but I had two other games that were much needed upgrades. But the sequels went in a somewhat different direction from its predecessor. Deca Sports 1 is fine. It works. There is good here, but the bad is very overwhelming and immediately turns people away. I know this is a game that's supposed to come off as another way of playing a game that's similar to Wii Sports, but I believe that if Hudson Soft focused on giving this game its own identity and going through the steps, we could have had something very special here, but unfortunately that's not the case. As a nostalgic, personal game, I love Deca Sports, but trying to look at this as critically as possible with as little bias as possible, I do believe that it's not as bad as others say, but I can totally understand where they're coming from. I played these games a lot. I know exactly what they're talking about, and it's valid. The negative criticisms are so valid, I can't deny it. Although there is one huge positive I'll give this game. It's leagues better than Nuts and Milk. So moving on to our next game, and I can't believe as a Deca Sports connoisseur that we got ourselves another one. Hudson Soft is back with Deca Sports 2, the newest experience in the flatlining Deca Sports timeline. So after a bit of time with the first game, Hudson Soft gathered fans in a Deca Sports forum on the official website that probably doesn't exist anymore and put up a poll as to what sports they wanted to see in a possible follow-up game. And that's how we got the weakest lineup of sports in the series, but let's hold off on that for a second. Released on the Wii in Japan on April 6, 2009. You know, the more I look into it, this video just can't be complete without me being wrong. I meant to say April 16th, but apparently, according to my fingers, I only wrote down April 6th instead of 16th. So yeah, Deca Sports 2 released in Japan on April 16th. I'm very sorry. I plan on uploading my apology video next week. May 15th, 2009 in Europe, June 4th, 2009 in Australia, and September 29th, 2009 in North America. It's about time we get something at last. We deserve it. 10 brand new sports, a different formula, kind of, and a brand new element, so let's see if this game can overthrow its weird father. The sports in this sequel seem very familiar to the first. Motion controls are back with their devil horns, and somehow, some way, it's worse in this game than the first. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but the inconsistency has been demoted to not good, so let's go over these weaklings. I'm surprised it took them 2 games in order to get their copycat tennis game, because these are supposed to be Wii Sports Clones last time I checked. We can play singles or doubles, set up how many sets we want to play, and even play on different courts. Tennis in Deca Sports 2 is very interesting, mainly because of how weird the motion controls are. There's a strange inconsistency that I notice whenever I play. I see myself hitting a certain type of shot more than others. For example, sometimes I hit a slice nearly every time I backhand or I topspin whenever I use my forward hand. It's interesting, but works against the dumber CPUs. I think I kinda gave this one a bit too much flack, but that doesn't take away the fact that this sport can be insanely slow most of the time. Although I do appreciate the grunting, as that's a staple to anything tennis related. This is similar to all the races in the first game, but these motorcycle races are a lot longer, and we generally race for 2 laps because of how much bigger these tracks are compared to the others. But we do have an option for 3 laps if we're feeling a little masochistic. There are 6 different tracks based on skill level, but that's mainly for tournaments and leagues. I really don't like this. The controls are so tight and strict. You can't make a clean turn without sliding into a wall. You basically have to rely on a straightaway, which are only so rare to begin with. It's even worse on the intermediate and advanced tracks. It makes me wonder how I've won tournaments in this sport. I might be a fraud. This is a really bad version of curling. I dread this sport every time I have to play it in the league. I just give the win to my opponent as fast as I can because this is my shovelware hell. The main goal is to toss your ball and get it as close as possible to the jack, which is that small yellow ball. It's literally curling, but instead of sliding stones, you get to throw some metal balls. It's my least favorite sport within the entire trilogy because of how much fun I don't have. This was a big time personal favorite when I was a kid. I don't know what it was about this sport. In retrospect, it's kind of boring, but it's fine. Maybe that's just my brain rotting. You get to choose any athlete and quote unquote control them while the rest of the team does their part of the routine. The gameplay concept definitely exists. We have to shake the Wii remote to the rhythm when the outer circle gets on top of the inner circle surrounding your athlete. Sometimes you have to go left, sometimes you have to go right, or even the rare occasion that you have to swing your Wii remote up for the special jumps. And then once you look up at your ceiling, you see your Wii remote hit your ceiling fan. Sometimes this sport feels lower than standard most of the time, and the music does its best to keep up. There was something about this sport that really spoke to me. Maybe it's because I couldn't do these tricks in the pool at the age of 11, but I do like the choreography and how our athletes move around. Your final score is based on your performance and your combos, but it's mainly for the entire team based on your own performance, so everything is in your hands. No f***ing pressure, huh? The gameplay does kinda suck because it's so vanilla, but it does hold a special place in my childhood heart that doesn't exist anymore. This is just vanilla darts with nothing special going on. I had zero problem with this game when I was younger, but looking back it's pretty annoying to play because of the motion controls. You could be aiming down the sexy triple 20, but when you thrust your Wii remote, you could possibly get a completely different score, aka a 1. Not as sexy as a 60, huh? It's not accurate in the slightest, but I'm not surprised. It really does feel like I have to get lucky the entire time, mainly because of the inaccuracy. Although there are 3 different modes to play with this sport, so at least there's a little bit of variety. With this sport, you have to be super precise with the controls, but it won't give you any brownie points for winning against a beginner CPU. I have no shame. This is sword fighting, but it's extremely slow and we don't even get to use real katanas. All I wanted to do was slice someone in half, but this game is rated E for some reason. You have to use the D-pad and inch your way closer to your opponent and try to hit them with a strike. There are a few different type of strikes you can pull off, and you can block them by using A or B. You aren't left too vulnerable if you miss, but this sport requires you to read your opponent and try to catch them off guard. It's best of 3, so whichever team wins 2 matches wins. This sport can be finished in less than a minute, or if you're playing against a harder CPU, possibly 5 minutes with minimized skill, or if you know what you're doing. If we could use real swords, this will be a 5 out of 5 sport regardless. There is way too much to this sport. It should not be like this, but let's go over it. Mogul skiing is where you and your opponents make your way down a slope and you have to turn in between these bumps that resemble something that I'm not going to say out loud, and we have to jump off ramps and do some cool tricks. Now when it comes to the controls, it's very simple. We bring in the nunchuck, and once the race starts, and alternately swing the 2 controllers with proper timing in order to keep up the speed going down. You also have to time this in order to get a better looking trick. This sport is very fast, and your points are based on the tricks you pull off and how fast you get to the end. You'll get bonus points if you're the first one to finish, and whoever has the most points at the end wins. It may not seem like a lot on paper for what this entire game is, but that's way too much to comprehend. Overall, it's a decent sport and so far the best one out of the bunch in my opinion. Next up, we have a sport that's banned in many states in North America because they're too afraid of children getting traumatized. Luckily, I was able to experience dodgeball in person before they relinquished one of many parents' favorite pastimes, decking their kid in the face with these legendary items. I believe this is the most simple game when it comes to control, and I think that's a big positive. You only have to catch, throw, and dodge. Similar to most of these games, depending on your opponent, games can fly by, but I think dodgeball makes for an intense game with harder CPUs. The constant catching and dodging leaving you at the edge of your seat can give you a great boost of fake adrenaline, and I do think this game has the best controls and execution. And my god, does this game need something good going its way. One of my favorite sports in the Winter Olympics, and it's pretty decent. It's super easy to understand, just get to the finish line before your opponent. Similar to mogul skiing, we have to swing the Wii remote and nunchuck alternately, but this time we have to press B and Z every time we swing them down. It is interesting, but you want to time your swings with these meters, and if you get them all the way filled up, you'll get yourself a nice speed boost, and this helps you with your general speed and the more consistent you are on the speed front. But I wouldn't bet on it because sometimes your nunchuck will fail on you even if you're doing everything right. the traditional 5v5 sport that puts a bow on every league that's played. This time around we got ourselves some really epic hockey. Something about this arena moves me in the wrong ways, although I do like the team logos on the ice. I will say, the last few sports are a nice way to wrap up a super weak lineup of sports. I do like the controls and how everything goes down while playing hockey. It's just hockey, there's nothing going on here. I do believe this is better than soccer from the first game, and I like how this game highlights what player got a goal. It's simple, but it works to the best of its abilities and gets the job done. And there isn't anything negative, but it also isn't perfect because of how bland it is. But I do believe it's still really good. There's a lot of similarities when it comes to the quality of these sports, but comparing it to the first, I do prefer pretty much all of those sports to any of these, although I really do like tennis, speed skating, hockey, and dodgeball, although I don't believe they can carry the load with their fellow sports, pentathlon, kendo, darts, road racing, and others. Unfortunately here, the bad overpowers the good. Another similarity I caught to the previous game is the consistency of my ratings, but obviously these ratings are much lower. The average rating is 2.5 out of 5, which is barely exceeding 50%, which isn't the best look for a sequel that's supposed to overtake the predecessor. So with this new but familiar experience, we got ourselves some new game modes, some easy returning modes, and one mode that got a facelift. The Open Match and League are the only unchanged modes, so I'm not going to explain them again. But we do have a new tournament formula, new challenges, and a change to the locker room. But let's take things one step at a time and start off with this new tournament. With this new tournament format, instead of one tournament per sport with progressive difficulty, we got ourselves 4 different tournaments based on difficulty, and this transferred over to the next game. The local league represents the 3 lowest CPU difficulties, national, which puts the CPUs at a consensus normal difficulty, global, which is represented as the hard difficulty, and once you win the global trophy in both the tournaments and the league, you will unlock the ability to play for the legend trophy. The CPUs are extremely difficult to defeat, and they will not hold a single thing back against you. I believe the main reason they changed the original tournament format was for 2 reasons. Number 1 is because the additions of many different difficulties. There are 9 somewhat unique difficulties in this game, so they just split them up in their own tournament and leagues. Number 2 is probably so we can continue playing the game and going at it with higher difficulties after we win the local cup. It's an interesting strategy of bringing in replay value, and whenever you win a tournament you could possibly ask yourself if you're ready for the next challenge. I'm not against this, but it does take away the charm of the progressive difficulty in the tournaments in the last game. Another aspect they left out was only picking one athlete to represent your team. This time around you can pick whoever you want for every round. That is nice to be able to choose your favorite athlete for whatever team, but I always did like the idea of throwing one athlete to try to bring your team to the top. Again, I'm not against this. Okay, so we got ourselves some new challenges to stick our heads in. Let's hope they don't get stuck. A lot of different ideas and some concepts brought back from the 2008 original, so let's take a look. We got 2 targets on the other side of the court. We have to target them and they get smaller throughout the event. Someone might want to turn the heat up or something. They also give us more points. It's not too hard because we only have to hit left and right, but there are times where you just hit the ball the opposite side when you don't want to. It's not terrible, but if the motion controls were a bit more consistent, this would be top tier. It's a time trial. I bet you didn't see this one coming. The only difference between this and all the other time trials from the first game is that we got 6 tracks to choose from for this one sport. Nothing else to say. This is way more interesting than the entire sport itself. We have to fit as many balls on this platform as possible, and that's a cool idea. If you miss a platform, you lose a ball that acts as your life, which is kind of weird. This goes on until you run out of lives. There are some great strategies to get the balls onto the platform, and it doesn't piss me off as much as the original sport, so that's a plus. I think this is the most outside the box challenge because it has nothing to do with synchronized swimming, but this is the most eye-opening time trial. We have to swim the breaststroke and finish up as fast as possible. Now the synchronized swimming aspect is that we have to swing the Wii remote as if we were playing the sport, but this determines our swim speed, and whenever we have to turn, we must switch up either right or left. It is the most interesting challenge in the game because of how different actual swimming is from dancing melodically in a pool. This is a pretty standard idea, but we have to throw our dart at a highlighted spot on the board. This is kinda similar to pentathlon. If you miss, you lose an attempt, and you have to try to go as far as you can without missing 3 shots. For me, because of the weak motion controls, I never really get far with this challenge, nor do I ever choose it unironically. We got ourselves another interesting and fun event. We have to defeat a string of opponents and try to see how far we can go. According to the game, there are 100 opponents to defeat. It's pretty cool and it brings more to the sport, giving us a lot more to do. I've only gotten 20% of the way through this challenge and that'll probably change at 21% in a few years. This also kind of reminds me of one of the sword fighting modes in Wii Sports Resort, except there is a lot more interesting, but here it's just constant 1v1s until you lose. Luckily, they didn't make this sport a stupid time trial because it wouldn't last long. Here we have to try to make a massive jump and go as far as we can. We have to get some good speed going and get through these boobs in a clean manner, and then we have to time the jump just right in order to go as far as we possibly can. The gameplay is a nice fit, especially as a takeaway from the original for it being a shorter challenge. Once again, I got myself another personal favorite when I was young. We have to dodge all the attacks that come our way for as long as possible, and once you get hit, it's game over. The longer we go, the machines start getting more tricky, and we have to be super careful with our steps as we go by, and we're not allowed to catch either. We have to either dodge or run for our lives. It's still very fun today, and one of my favorite challenges in the game. Originally, I remember this being a time trial, but it turns out that I'm always wrong. This time around, we have to skate around the course and go as far as we possibly can within the time limit. Honestly, it's nothing special, but this can definitely help you with your timing of the controls, so it does make for some pretty good practice. Our final challenge is a 3v2. We send 3 warriors of our choice onto the ice and try to get as many goals as we possibly can within the time limit. With some extra spice, no goalkeepers are allowed. It is incredibly easy because the defense is very weak, mainly because there are literally no defenders. It's 3 forwards versus 2 forwards. But getting a chain of goals is very satisfying, and this has been a fun one ever since I got good at video games. I did notice a massive trend with these challenges. A hard majority of them, in my opinion, exceed their original sports. These are smaller bits of content, but most of them bring more satisfaction than most of the original sports themselves. That clearly makes the originals look worse in comparison. I never really thought about it, but now that I'm looking at this, it's another reason why I believe this police lineup of sports is the weakest within this trilogy. So the locker room in Deca Sports 1 was a nice little shrine with some cool information, whether it be trophies or the teams we play as. But with this sequel, we got ourselves a new look and concept for the locker room. It's a lot bigger and there's a lot more to be done here. We got a tutorial section where we can practice these sports, but no one cares about that. We got 2 major additions to this locker room, and one of them is an evolution of records from DS1. I did forget to mention that in this game and the following game, we were introduced to player files. You can have up to 4 files of their own unique origin that we'll get into in a minute. The user file gives us lots of interesting numbers. As we play the sports, we gain or lose skill points, and these are supposed to determine your skill with said sport. The max number of skill points we can get for every sport is 999 by being part of the legend class. It's very reflective to see where you're at with a certain sport, and most of them can be very accurate, especially if you see yourself playing some sports more than others. I really do like this info as it's a nice way of tracking your progress. Next up is our records and trophy cases. We get to see our league trophies, tournament trophies, and challenge medals. Similar to Deca Sports 1, we get to see the number of trophies we won, but there are more trophies to be won with this new league and tournament format as we get more trophies. And it's always nice to bask in your own self-glory of defeating 13-year-old robots. Here we have the biggest addition to the franchise, and I'm all for it. It's my favorite aspect of the entire trilogy alongside the Disco Knight's existence. And this is the main reason why we have player files in these games, and that is having the ability to create and customize your own team. I would have been a little bit tilted if this didn't come to the sequel, but luckily we got that extra push. We get to create and play as our own athletes. We can adjust nearly everything we want, and at some point in my life I created this team. The fact that we can make our character's skin color turquoise was a setup for everyone, including myself. I don't regret a single thing. I made a full team of fake aliens, and I even made my own personal all-star team. We can make anyone we want and see them in action, whether they're just normal people or the most cursed things you've ever seen. I love it, and it does make this game a little bit better overall. In my eyes, there is a clear dip in quality here compared to the first game, but I do see some green here. There's even one that's monumental, but it's not enough to warrant me giving this game a higher rating. I really did enjoy the somewhat realistic look of our athletes and the environments from the first game. It's a cozy, nostalgic look and feel for me, but I know we can work on that. New models, animations, and all that good stuff. I believe everything looks great. This is without a doubt my biggest green, but it has to go up against every red I have, and that's gonna be a tough battle. Being able to create your own characters in any game is a massive plus for me because I've always loved character customization, whether it be creating yourself or the most cursed thing in the world. I like that we have an option to use our creative minds to build something within that universe. Deca Sports 2 gives you that pleasure, and that's how I created the aliens on a random day in 2012. I don't even know when I created them. Not only can we build our own team of athletes, we can also give our team a name, game, create our own team colors, pick our logo, which is the weakest part of this entire process because the preset logos are very lame. In my case, some of them definitely work, but all the other ones, I just don't see myself using. Character creation is one of the best things that mankind has come up with because it allows for even more imagination, which is always fun. I've stated many times that the main sports in Deca Sports 2 are not the way. They're underwhelming, felt kinda broken at times, inconsistent, and other words that match that vibe. I believe these sports were supposed to be an evolution of the previous game. There are even some mirror reflections of others: tennis and badminton, road racing, kart racing, supercross, pentacle, and curling. There are some new and improved sports, but I would take every sport from DS1 than any of these anytime. This is one of the main reasons why the main sports are low quality. Motion controls tend to have a mind of their own in any Wii game that wasn't developed by a Nintendo studio. The inconsistency is a big problem. Sometimes it works when you want it to, but most of the time it doesn't. I'm not going to dog on this too hard, but it's so noticeable that it can't be ignored. As much as I love the customization, I do believe that there could be a bit more to choose from when creating these athletes. It's interesting that we can't just create our own skin, hair, and eye colors. Imagine if we could do that as if we were creating our own team colors. Just give us a color wheel and just let us go off. That would lead to a lot more creativity, which I think a lot of people have. I do believe Deca Sports 2 is fine, but it's also worse than the original. The low quality sports, buggy type motion controls, pentacle existing, and other elements. I believe this to be the most flimsy game out of the trilogy and my least favorite. Once again, as a personal game, I really like it. I see myself enjoying it a lot, but not as much as the first or even the next. It's unfortunate, but every franchise had this downed, but luckily we'll be ending on a big bang. And so we're at the final chapter, and I would say we're ending on a very positive note. From what I found, nothing really stood out during development, so I'm just gonna guess that it was very quiet in the studios. Deca Sports 3 released first in Japan on September 16th, 2010, October 15th, 2010 in Europe, and October 26th, 2010 in North America. Yeah, Australia decided to say no this time, and honestly I can't blame them after Deca Sports 2. So this time around, the sports we play are relative to sports that are commonly played in high school and college, and last time I checked, I'm not finding a 16-year-old piloting a jet at blazing speeds in the middle of a desert. In my eyes, a nice majority of these sports exceed all 20 of the previous sports we talked about, and that shouldn't make an ounce of sense, but what does anymore? So let's see how this game improves literally everything that the neglectful father Deca Sports 2 should have expanded on. Alright, so let's take a nice look at these teams once again. There is one massive difference to our beloved athletes, and that's the fact that every team, including the customizable teams, have an extra teammate added to their squad, which bumps the 5 athletes per team to 6. There are 2 sports that warrant this change, and I'm all for it, as 8 teams gain a brand new member, and that's awesome. It's one of the biggest changes we get, as it's always weird to see 6 athletes instead of the usual 5. Luckily, they didn't get rid of the OGs. That would have made this game a lot worse if I couldn't play as Cliff anymore. So we got ourselves our final 10 sports to play around with, but there is a very interesting addition that this game offers, and that's a certain mode that requires the Wii Motion Plus. Whenever you choose any mode in the game, you will have the option to pick either normal or master modes, and this is relative to the controls. Master mode relies on more technical and precise motion gestures, as they add a new layer of depth to the gameplay for every sport. So to switch things up, I will go over the general sport itself, and then after that review, I will show off and talk about how master mode changes that sport and why I don't pick it in the first place. To start off, we jump into water very elegantly. That's gonna bump down the rating. This is similar to real life diving events where you have to do tricks on your way down and try to make the smallest splash possible. Once we make our way up and into the water, we have these quick time events where we have to swing the Wii remote in whichever direction is shown, and as we make our way down, we have to watch the outer circle make its way towards the inner circle, and we have to time the swing of our Wii remote just right. If you get it close enough, you'll get a small splash and you'll get a really good score out of it. The tricks that you pull off and the splash affect your score. The more complex the trick and the smaller the splash, the higher you score. It's super easy and pretty fun. Master mode, on the other hand, is where things go off the rails. We have different directions, and that goes from swinging your Wii remote diagonally like a sword to scooping up ice cream. And I remember this threw me off so hard I failed everything and quit. But the more technical controls are still easy to remember if you decide to play enough, which I might try, but I'm not into self-torture. It may not be katanas, but this is better than kendo. We have to stab our opponents and defend ourselves. We can parry their attacks that leave them vulnerable and capitalize on their mistakes. Whoever gets to the fixed amount of points first wins, or whoever has the most points as the time ends takes home the W. Master mode in this sport is the most Wii thing ever, because wherever your Wii remote is, your fencing sword goes as well in the gameplay. You get to attack from different angles and also parry, but again, it's a lot more precise. This brings a new type of strategy to the sport, and that's a very nice addition to have. Let's hope I can make Shaun White proud, although the possibilities of that are very low, but we have to make our way down this hill and do some epic tricks. We have to time our jumps just right, and not only will that affect our final score, but that also goes for our general speed. We want to be going as fast as possible to do the most tricks possible. I can never get the timing right, and that leads to not many wins during higher level leagues. I generally skip this one, but let's see if Master Mode can redeem it. Now when it comes to this new mode, we have the ability to switch styles while we're in the air after pulling off a trick. The timing for the trick circle is more strict and faster, and the more I play it, the more I realize that it's just a choice on if you want to switch board styles or not, and it's just normal half pipe, which means in my eyes it's very boring and not all that fun. This is basically a speedrun of who can cut a log the fastest. The gameplay is relatively similar to the real thing. We have to act as if we're actually cutting a log and move the Wii remote back and forth. These little arrows are indicators of the quality and speed of the cut. If you get as close as you can and then go the opposite direction, you'll get a speed boost, and every time you do this, the faster you'll cut. It's a really cool way of figuring out how fast you can finish up a certain amount of logs. In Master Mode, you actually have to keep the Wii remote as balanced as you possibly can while holding it upright, and that brings a massive challenge to the sport because you have to worry about the balance of your saw and the speed. It depends on your own skill level and the CPU difficulty on if you fail or not. I've always liked this sport, and I'm glad that hasn't changed after all these years. We got ourselves some classic 6v6 indoor volleyball. This is a lot better from beach volleyball from the first because there's a lot more going on and the controls work very well. I don't really need to go too deep into this, it's just volleyball. So let's go over the more advanced and semi-realistic way of playing volleyball. There's a lot of complexity when it comes to both offensive and defensive sides of the ball when playing in Master Mode. On offense, serving, setting, and spiking are a lot more complicated. When serving and spiking, you actually get to choose which direction you want to hit the ball. You also have the choice to hit the ball further back on the court or keep it close to the net. When setting up your team for a spike, everyone can get in on the action instead of just 2 players in front and 1 in the back row on the right in normal mode. On defense though, you have to manually put your team in a defensive formation and send them to wherever the opponent is going to set up their teammates. You can stay in the middle, go left or right. This makes you think about what you need to prioritize on defense, whether it be going for blocks or just continuing the rally with a defensive motion, and I love the added strategy. It makes the sport more interesting and harder to read your opponents, especially since you have to pay more attention. Well, here I was giving the controls some praise and it was nice. Then we had to get possibly my least favorite sport in the game. Kayaking in general is pretty cool, but in a race where sometimes you have to turn around and make your way up and go backwards, in my opinion, not that fun. We have to act as if the Wii remote are paddles, and sometimes the controls will just bug out because the sensor on the Wii remote isn't completely in front of the sensor bar, so it takes a quick second for it to pick up, but it still works. When we have to play the other courses, I'll gladly take my L. So instead of just tilting the Wii remote in a normal fashion, in Master Mode we have to for real act as if we're kayaking, and oh my god, I understand that it's Master Mode, but good lord, is it tough to use a Wii remote as an object that's about a foot or two longer. It's tough, but I gotta respect it. The name is 50% false advertising because we don't race against anyone in real time, but instead we have to fly around a course and make our way through obstacles in the fastest time possible. If you notice the difference in gameplay from normal and Master Mode, that means that we aren't as free with how we control our plane. It's really tight and you have to take your time around these courses, and you can't go as fast unless you're a daredevil ready for some action. Racquetball is a very underrated sport in real life. It's basically playing on a wooden tennis court that was cut in half, squeezed in a little bit, and along with 3 walls. It can be a very fast-paced game. Here it's kinda slow, but luckily not too slow, and one wrong swing gives you or the opponent a big advantage for a smash that sends the ball flying in all the directions and disorienting the eyes. It can get the blood flowing in ways that should be illegal. In normal mode of this sport, your player has a mind of their own and moves automatically, only leaving you to make the call on when to hit the ball. But if you're a master of character movement, then you'll love playing Master Racquetball. We have to use the nunchuck in order to move our athlete, and our swings are dependent on timing and how we swing our Wii remote. The only thing I don't like but also understand is the slow movement speed, but you'll get to where you need to in order to miss your swing. Let's glide down the snowy slopes of Alaska and see how fast we can get to the end. That's what giant slalom is all about, and I'm not a fan of it in this game. The controls are relatively strict when you try to turn, and that mainly leads to a result that you were not searching for. We got 3 different courses, and I can only be competent on 2 of them. The only difference between normal and master is that you have to lower the Wii remote and nunchuck horizontally in order to crouch and increase your speed. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but it does feel better here than it does in normal, and that's a nice bonus. Welcome to the representative of rich college sports. I think this is the best of the team versus team sports out of soccer and hockey. It's pretty fun to play and super easy to understand because it's not as intense as the actual sport of lacrosse. We can't do a backflip shot, but we can pass the ball to the wall on purpose. In master mode, they really emphasize the technicality of passing because in normal mode it's automatic, but this time around our pass goes to wherever the control stick is facing, and this threw me off so hard that we actually have to look at our teammates in order to give them the ball instead of epic no-look passes. But that is a nice piece of realism even though no one likes that in their video games. So other than Master Mode being an extra option for tougher competition with more advanced controls, there really isn't anything that has changed or is different from Deca Sports 2 other than the challenges. Also, thankfully for the sake of my sanity, there are no time trials this time around, so this makes these sets of challenges possibly better than the others. Have you ever wondered how many times you can flip in midair before landing on your face? Well, we can do just that with this challenge. We have to spam our arm like crazy and see how many front flips we can pull off in one jump, and if anyone walks in on you during this, just don't say a word and finish up. This is a very weird version of Fruit Ninja. We don't slice fruits, we stab them, and there's a possibility we get some metal balls to throw us off. From strawberries to oranges and even watermelons, we have to stab as many fruits as we can and get the highest score possible. It's interesting, but just think about your least favorite person as those fruits and just stab them like there's no tomorrow. I own Shaun White merchandise, but that doesn't transfer his skill to my arm when I play Deca Sports 3. We have to chain a consecutive number of tricks and go on for as long as we can, and once we miss a trick, it's game over. As time goes by, things go a lot faster and you have to have great reflexes to keep things going, and it's a rush. Probably my favorite of the challenges, mainly because of the variety of objects we get to cut in half. We have to cut as many things as possible within the time limit. It's so obscure, but I'm glad that we get the chance to slice open a car engine. This is very similar to beach volleyball. We have to spike the ball at the target, but this time around it's constantly moving, which means we have to read the damn circle and have good timing based on a DVD logo. So instead of a time trial, we have to make our way down this river creek, avoid massive rocks, and get to the waterfall at the end, and we're free at last. I love this because it's pretty creative and it sticks to the original concept of this sport, but it puts us in a different and more life-threatening scenario. This also could have been a time trial, but again, we got some fun creativity. We have to go around the environment and pop these bubbles or balloons or whatever they are. They give us a fixed amount of points based on their size. We have to pop as many as possible before time runs out. Again, the creativity is fun and a great addition because 4 of these sports could have been boring time trials, but we got lucky here. This is similar to normal racquetball, but instead of a 1v1 or a 2v2, the walls give us points whenever we hit a certain area. Keep the rally going and get as much points as possible. We can set ourselves up for success just by hitting the ball constantly, or set ourselves up for failure by just not hitting the ball at all. Rack up all the points and don't hit yourself in the face. Once again, could have been another set of time trials, but I really love this idea. We have to put on a balancing act as the track gets thinner and thinner, and you have to ski as far as possible, and when you fall, say goodbye. I really do like playing keep away every now and then, and that's why the lacrosse challenge is a top 3 favorite. We have to keep the ball in our possession and avoid the oncoming traffic of athletes who are hungry for a lacrosse ball for some reason. They soon run away after a certain amount of time, but that doesn't make anything less stressful or more thrilling. It's a really fun one. The challenges in this game are so unique and gives the game more charm and personality as they are legit enjoyable. Most of them are on the same level as the original sport. I'm just happy we didn't get 4 different time trials, as log cutting, giant slalom, kayak slalom, and air racing could have been just that, but Hudson Soft decided to use their brains and develop some fun extra content with these challenges, and the creativity is a great bonus. There is a very clear silver line of improvement with this game in my eyes. There is a ton of good to this product. It may be super similar to the second game, but you can tell that it takes its own steps to being its own piece of work. I do believe that we get the best sports of the franchise. 70% of these sports I thoroughly enjoy, and the other 30% I don't prefer, but I'm not completely hating on them either. The quality of these sports are at their best here. I think there's a better scale of consistency with enjoyable sports, and even the ones I'm not spreading my legs over don't make me want to go into cryo sleep. I believe Deca Sports 2 could have used something similar to Master Mode. This is what makes this game more unique and replayable because you can challenge yourself. These sports are relatively simple and easy to understand on the first go, but Master Mode gives us a reason to come back and challenge ourselves with these new motion controls. I feel like people would prefer this mode as their go-to over normal because of that added difficulty, and I believe that's a great way of making your game more unique, especially because of how simple the gameplay is in general. Obviously this game isn't perfect, but it far exceeds its abusive father and passionate grandfather. The reds are more so how this could have been a true evolution to the second game instead of taking bits and pieces and just painting it red. Because this game takes the character customization to somewhat a new level with an extra athlete, I do believe that there should have been more features that you can add to your character. Different eyes, hairstyles, skin, and hair colors. Brought it over and barely changed it, but I'm still happy that it exists. There is an interesting consistency with these games and what kind of gameplay you can expect, because once you play one game, you basically played all of them. I do wish there were some new modes to give us even more options to choose from, but I'm not going to dock this game too hard for that, even though it really could have benefited from that. Deca Sports 3 in my eyes is the best of this trilogy. The consistency is bumped up to a higher level that even the filler games couldn't achieve. All of the easy improvements, the fun catalog of sports and challenges. For me, there's a lot to love, but that doesn't take away from this being a Deca Sports game in the first place. Obviously, it's going to transfer traits of the past and be these super simple and kinda bland minigame collections. And we have to remember why these games exist in the first place, and that's to give people another option whenever they decide to feel a bit spicy and get tired of playing Wii Sports and Resort. I'm going to leave people with their opinions on this game and respect them because a lot of the criticism is very valid. I should know that better than anyone. But Deca Sports 3 is a massive upgrade, and with the addition of Master Mode and the consistency, it brings a more refreshing experience. I'm going to be super generous with my rating. Others may think it's too high, and that's why we have the human brain, to form our own opinions on things like this. But don't trust a single thing a 2-year-old has to say about nuts and milk, because I will guarantee you that they're wrong. And with that, we have finally come to the end of this massive project. Deca Sports will always be polarizing because of the quality and what it was meant to be. I said it earlier, but if Hudson Soft decided to give this game its own flair that separated itself from other games, we could have had a very special yet still obscure franchise in this timeline. But when it came down to it, they only cared about creating something that wasn't going to be able to one-up. Nostalgia calls out to me in the best ways with this trilogy. I truly do love these games, but I'm not going to deny the flaws, nor am I going to let that same nostalgia blind me from what's actually in front of me. These games aren't that good. They're very cookie cutter, and there was zero passion put into these products. I do believe that there is another timeline where Deca Sports is a AAA series with tons of installments across a multitude of gaming platforms, but unfortunately what we got in this reality is just Deca Sports. It's unfortunate, but there are a ton of games like this that still come out to this very day. Although I'd rather spend the rest of my days trying to 100% every Deca Sports game than play through Sakura Succubus.